It was late one evening when I first noticed something strange next door. The rain was pouring down, tapping against the window, when I heard it, a sound that shouldn't have been there. It was coming from my neighbor's house. Soft, steady, and too rhythmic to be anything normal. I thought nothing of it at first. But as the days went by, it became impossible to ignore. And when I finally decided to look closer, that's when I realized something was terribly wrong. What you're about to hear is the story of a quiet neighborhood, a house that always seemed off, and the terrifying truth that was hiding right next door. You'll want to stay till the end of this story, because what happened next left me speechless. My name is Emily. I moved to a small, quiet suburban neighborhood, hoping for a fresh start. It wasn't a grand move, just a change in scenery, a place to breathe and forget the noise of the city. The street was everything you could expect: pristine lawns, the smell of freshly cut grass, and the gentle sound of rain falling on rooftops at night. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It should have been the perfect place for a peaceful life. But then there was the house across the street. The house that never seemed quite right. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, but there was something unsettling about it. The lights never seemed to work properly, flickering on and off at strange times, and the windows were always covered. No one ever came or went. Not a single car parked in the driveway, but the house never looked abandoned. I couldn't help but wonder, who lived there? Or if anyone did at all. At first, I tried to ignore it. But one night, while the rain tapped on the roof above me, I heard something strange. Footsteps. Not the sound of footsteps on the sidewalk or even on the street outside. No, this was different, closer. It was coming from the neighbor's house. I brushed it off as my imagination playing tricks on me, but the next night, the same thing happened. And the night after that. Then came the shadows. The first time I saw it, I was sitting in my living room, watching TV, when I caught a glimpse through the window. There was someone in the house. But the curtains were drawn tight, so I couldn't see their face. Just the silhouette of a figure moving through the rooms. But it wasn't just once. Night after night, the same figure would move from window to window. And then, the tapping started. Light, rhythmic, like someone trying to get my attention. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. But every time I tried to look closer, nothing. One night, after days of strange noises and unsettling shadows, I decided to confront the mystery. I waited until the rain began to fall heavily, masking my movements. My heart pounded in my chest as I made my way across the street, standing in front of the house, my eyes fixed on the window. I wasn't sure what I expected to see, but what I found froze me in place. Through the thick glass of the window, there was a figure, standing perfectly still, their back turned to me. At first, I thought it was just a person, but something about it felt wrong. The figure didn't move, didn't blink. It was as if it wasn't even breathing. Before I could react, the lights went out. Darkness. Total silence. And then, nothing. I couldn't hear any movement inside, no sounds of breathing, not even a shuffle of feet. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, waiting. But nothing happened. The next day, the house looked the same as it always did. The lights flickered, the windows were drawn. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Something had happened inside that house, and I was far too close to the truth. As the days passed, the strange occurrences didn't stop. In fact, they grew worse. At night, I could hear sounds, creaking, scuffling, like something was moving in the attic above. I couldn't stand it any longer. I needed answers. I gathered up the courage and knocked on the door. At first, there was no answer. But after what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open, revealing an older man with a tired face. He didn't look surprised to see me standing there. But the unease in his eyes told me he knew exactly what I was there for. I asked him about the noises, about the strange shadows I'd seen through the window. His face grew pale as I spoke, but he didn't deny anything. Instead, he invited me in. What I discovered inside that house would haunt me for the rest of my life. In the attic, hidden behind layers of dust and cobwebs, was a room. A room that had been untouched for years. Inside, there were things I can't describe, things I wish I'd never seen. But the most chilling part of all. I wasn't alone. And neither was the neighbor. It turns out the man wasn't living alone. But what was in that attic? Something far more terrifying than anyone could imagine. As I stood there, looking into the empty space, the silence became deafening. Then, the door slammed shut behind me, and I realized, the house had never been empty. Not once. I turned around to confront the neighbor, but he was gone. And just as I reached for the door, I heard a whisper behind me, one that made my blood run cold. You should have stayed away. What do you think is hidden in that attic? Let me know in the comments below. Was there something, or someone, in that house? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to hear more chilling true stories like this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. And share this with your friends if you dare. Stay tuned. The truth may be even more terrifying than we know. They say the house whispers. It's a voice, a low, guttural sound, carried on the wind. Some say it's the wind, others say it's something else entirely. It was a quiet night in the heartland of America, a small town where shadows seemed to stretch longer and darker. The year was 1972, a time of innocence and fear, a time when the unknown still held a terrifying allure. My name is Stefan, and I'm about to share a story that has haunted me for decades. A story of a house, a family, and a darkness that consumed them all. The story begins with a seemingly ordinary family, the Millers. They moved into an old Victorian house, a relic of a bygone era, full of creaky floorboards and shadowed corners. At first, it was a charming, if somewhat eerie, place to call home. But as the days turned into weeks, a strange, unsettling feeling began to settle over the family. Strange occurrences began to plague the household. Doors would creak open in the dead of night, cold spots would appear in warm rooms, and inexplicable noises echoed through the halls. The children, Emily and Thomas, started having nightmares, their sleep disturbed by shadowy figures and whispered threats. The parents, Sarah and David, dismissed the incidents as mere coincidences or tricks of the mind. But as the disturbances intensified, a sense of dread began to consume them. One night, Sarah awoke to the sound of a child's laughter, a chilling, high-pitched giggle that seemed to emanate from the attic. Fear, cold and sharp, gripped her heart. She crept up the stairs, her footsteps muffled by the worn carpet, and peered into the darkness. The laughter ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. As days turned into weeks, the family's grip on reality began to loosen. The house, once a place of comfort, became a prison, a labyrinth of shadows and secrets. The children grew withdrawn, their eyes haunted by fear. Sarah and David, desperate to protect their family, sought help from a local priest, Father O'Malley. Father O'Malley, a man of faith and experience, was initially skeptical. But as he delved deeper into the family's ordeal, he began to believe that something sinister was at work. He performed a blessing on the house, but the disturbances continued. The priest, a man of science and reason, was forced to confront the possibility of the supernatural. The darkness within the house seemed to grow, feeding on the family's fear. The children began to see apparitions, shadowy figures that moved silently through the halls. Emily, the younger child, claimed to have a friend, a girl named Lily, who only she could see. Lily, with her vacant eyes and ethereal form, was a harbinger of doom. David, once a rational man, began to unravel. He spent nights poring over old books, searching for answers. He became convinced that the house was cursed, a gateway to a dark, otherworldly realm. Sarah, desperate to protect her family, sought solace in religion. She spent hours praying, begging for divine intervention. One night, a terrifying event shook the family to their core. A violent storm raged outside, the wind howling like a banshee. The power went out, plunging the house into darkness. A cold, icy draft swept through the house, and the family huddled together, their fear palpable. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the house. It was Emily, her voice filled with terror. Sarah and David rushed to her room, their hearts pounding. The room was in disarray, furniture overturned, and Emily was nowhere to be found. A frantic search ensued, but there was no sign of Emily. The only clue was a chilling message scrawled on the wall in blood-red paint, "She's gone." The family was plunged into despair. They had lost their daughter, their innocence, and their sanity. The house, once a source of comfort, had become a tomb. The darkness that had consumed them was relentless, a force that seemed to feed on their fear and sorrow. As the days turned into weeks, the family's hope dwindled. The house, once filled with laughter and love, was now a silent, haunted place. The only sound was the soft whisper of the wind, carrying with it the echoes of a terrible secret. The Millers, forever changed by their harrowing ordeal, retreated from the world. The once vibrant family was now a shell of its former self. Sarah, haunted by the image of Lily's spectral form, found solace in religion. She spent countless hours in prayer, seeking solace and understanding. David, once a man of reason, was forever scarred by the supernatural. He became a recluse, his mind consumed by the mysteries of the unknown. The children, Emily and Thomas, struggled to recover from the trauma. Emily, once a bright and cheerful child, was now withdrawn and silent. She often spoke of seeing Lily, a constant reminder of the darkness that had invaded their lives. Thomas, the younger child, developed a fear of the dark, a fear that would haunt him for years to come. The house, the source of their torment, was abandoned. It stood as a testament to the power of evil, a reminder of the horrors that lurked in the shadows. Locals whispered about the house, sharing tales of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena. The house became a place of fear, a place to be avoided at all costs. Years later, the Millers moved away, seeking a new life, a fresh start. But the past was never far behind. The memories of their ordeal, the horrors they had witnessed, continued to haunt them. As the years passed, the Millers slowly began to heal. Emily, now a young woman, found solace in art, using her brush to express the emotions she couldn't put into words. Thomas, a budding scientist, sought to understand the world through reason and logic, a way to combat the irrational fears that had once consumed him. Sarah and David, though forever marked by their past, found peace in their faith and in the love of their children. They learned to live with the darkness, to acknowledge its existence without succumbing to its power. Yet, the house remained, a constant reminder of their ordeal. It stood as a symbol of the supernatural, a place where the veil between the living and the dead was thin. And as the years passed, the legend of the haunted house grew, a chilling tale passed down from generation to generation. Even today, the house stands, a relic of the past. Some say it is still haunted, a place where the spirits of the past linger. Others dismiss these claims as mere folklore, the product of a superstitious mind. But those who dare to approach the house, who dare to peer into its darkened windows, feel a sense of unease, a chilling sensation that creeps down their spine. The story of the Millers, a family consumed by darkness, is a cautionary tale, a reminder that the supernatural is real, and that the darkness can consume even the strongest of souls. It is a story that will continue to haunt the minds of those who dare to listen, a chilling reminder that the horrors of the past can never truly be forgotten. The story of the Millers is a chilling reminder that the darkness can lurk in the most ordinary of places. It's a tale that has stayed with me for decades, a constant presence in the shadows of my mind. The house, with its spectral secrets, continues to cast a long shadow. It's a place where the veil between worlds is thin, a place where the supernatural can manifest. As I reflect on this story, I can't help but wonder, what other horrors lurk in the shadows, waiting to be unleashed? I encourage you, the listener, to share your own experiences with the supernatural. Have you ever felt a presence, heard a voice, or witnessed something unexplainable? Your stories could shed light on the mysteries that surround us. By sharing your experiences and subscribing to this channel, you can help to build a community of like-minded individuals. Together, we can explore the dark side of reality, and uncover the secrets that lie beyond the veil. As the final notes of the haunting melody fade, and the screen darkens, let us remember that the darkness is never far away. It lurks in the shadows, waiting for its chance to strike. So be careful, listener, for you never know what may be watching you in the night. Did you know, statistically, more people report seeing paranormal figures in elevators than almost anywhere else? It's almost as if there's something about that tight, confined space, maybe the isolation, or perhaps something else, something we can't quite explain, something that changes the very air around you. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was supposed to be a quick visit, nothing more than a night spent in one of the oldest hotels in the city. The kind of place you book on a whim, maybe because it has a bit of history, a bit of charm. But what I got was more than I bargained for. The hotel had been around for decades, and you could feel it the moment you stepped inside. The walls held stories, you could almost sense them in the quiet, in the dim glow of the old-fashioned sconces, flickering every so often. But it was the elevator that stood out most to me. An ancient contraption, creaky and slow, wedged into a narrow, claustrophobic space at the end of the hallway. The doors were heavy, metallic, and groaned when they opened, as if reluctant to let anyone inside. I'd read some brief accounts online before arriving, nothing I took seriously at the time, rumors, I thought. Missing guests, sightings of dark figures that no one could explain, and stories of guests who would ride that elevator, only to never be seen again. But those were just stories, right? Urban legends to add a bit of thrill to the hotel's reputation. I didn't think much of it, until that night. They say the most disturbing things happen when you least expect them. And that night, all I wanted was a peaceful evening and a few hours of sleep. But as I stepped into that elevator, there was an odd sensation that hit me, like walking into a room where someone had just left, only, it didn't feel like they were entirely gone. I shrugged it off, pressed the button for my floor, and waited. The doors closed slowly, almost hesitantly, and the elevator lurched, beginning its journey. I remember thinking that the elevator seemed to have a life of its own, moving with a slight sway that felt off, somehow. I glanced at the floor numbers, waiting for the slow climb. And that's when it happened. As we passed the third floor, the elevator stopped. Abruptly. No shudder, no sound. It just stopped. I thought maybe it was an old elevator with a glitch, maybe a mechanical failure. But then I heard something, quiet, faint. It wasn't a malfunction. There was something else, something, barely audible, like a murmur just outside the doors. A voice, I thought at first. I strained to listen, convinced it must be a trick of the mind, maybe the sound of pipes in the walls. But it didn't stop. The longer I stood there, the louder it became, growing, like footsteps moving closer. I felt a chill creep up my spine. It wasn't cold, just a feeling. And then, as suddenly as it had stopped, the elevator moved again. But it wasn't taking me to my floor. Instead, it started descending, floor by floor, back down to the basement, though I hadn't pressed a thing. It was as if someone else was controlling it. At that moment, a thought crossed my mind. I was no longer alone. And as we reached the basement, that's when I realized I might be about to find out why so many people had never come back up. The doors slid open to reveal the basement, dimly lit, deserted, with old, crumbling walls that looked like they hadn't seen much of anyone in years. I'd planned on stepping out, thinking maybe I could take the stairs back up to my floor. But something stopped me. It was almost a pull, keeping me rooted in place. I can't explain it, but I felt compelled to stay in that elevator, as if leaving wasn't an option. So, I stayed. I pressed the button for my floor again, just wanting to be anywhere else. The doors closed, and the elevator shuddered before it started moving. But this time, something felt different. The hum grew louder, an almost grinding sound, as if the machinery was under some kind of strain. And then, it happened again. Just as we passed the third floor, the elevator stopped, abruptly. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. But standing there, staring at the closed doors, the silence became thick, pressing in on me. And then, faintly, I heard it. A soft, muffled sound, like breathing. At first, I thought it might be my own, the sound amplified in the cramped space. But this was different. Rhythmic. Heavy. The kind of breathing that comes from somewhere close, but not too close, like someone standing just behind you, just out of sight. I turned around, half expecting to see someone there. But I was met with my own reflection in the mirrored wall. My face was pale, eyes wide, and for a moment, I wondered if the reflection might show something, or someone, standing behind me. But it was just me. I pressed the button again, willing the elevator to move, to do something. And finally, after what felt like ages, it jolted, and we started moving again. Only this time, it wasn't up. The elevator was descending, back down toward the basement. But I hadn't pressed anything. My heart pounded as I watched the numbers tick down, floor by floor. I tried pressing the buttons, all of them, but they didn't respond. The elevator had a mind of its own. It was taking me somewhere, and I was trapped, helpless to stop it. When we hit the basement again, the doors opened slowly, creaking as they did. The space beyond was darker now, somehow even more lifeless. I could see deeper into the basement, past the edges of light cast from the elevator's interior, into shadows that seemed to stretch further than I remembered. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something, a figure, barely visible in the darkness, standing motionless. My eyes adjusted, and I could make out more of its shape. It wasn't clear, like looking through fog or smoke. But it was there, standing just outside the elevator, almost waiting, watching. I couldn't make out a face, just a presence, cold and unyielding. It felt as if it was expecting me to step out, to join it in that endless, empty space. I didn't dare move. The elevator doors started to close, slowly shutting out the darkness and whatever was waiting within it. But as they did, I swear I saw the figure step forward, closing the distance, as if it had finally found what it was looking for. The doors closed just in time, sealing me off from whatever horror lay outside. I let out a shaky breath, but my relief was short-lived. The lights flickered once, twice, before the elevator shuddered to life. This time, it moved again, but I didn't know where it was taking me. The display above the door went dark, the buttons refused to respond. I was left in the darkness, the hum of the motor growing louder, almost as if it were whispering something. And I was beginning to realize that this wasn't over. As the elevator began moving again, it felt colder. Not just a chill in the air, but something deeper. It settled into my bones, sending a shiver up my spine that I couldn't shake. I could feel my breath coming quicker, and that sensation, that suffocating sense of being watched, grew stronger with every second. It was almost like a pair of eyes were studying me, scrutinizing every move, but from nowhere I could see. I was gripping the railing, trying to steady myself, but just then, the elevator slowed and stopped. The doors slid open again, revealing a floor, but this wasn't the lobby, or any floor I recognized. This floor was dark, empty, stretching out into shadows with no end in sight. There was a single, flickering light down the corridor, casting an eerie glow that danced along the walls. I hesitated, instinctively pulling back, not daring to step out. But then, I felt it, a cold rush of air, as if something unseen had swept past me. I told myself it was just a draft, something easily explained, but deep down, I knew it was something else. I knew I wasn't alone. And then I heard it. Faint at first, almost like it was trying to hide within the silence. A whisper. Quiet, barely there, like someone was standing just beyond the elevator doors, murmuring words I couldn't understand. I strained to listen, trying to make sense of the sounds. But they were fragmented, almost disjointed, like pieces of a memory struggling to surface. And then, louder this time, I heard something else, a soft, rhythmic tapping. Footsteps. Slow and measured, drawing closer. Imagine it for a moment. Standing there, trapped in a small, cold metal box, hearing footsteps that shouldn't be there, coming closer, inch by inch, echoing in the darkness. You can feel it in the pit of your stomach, that sinking feeling telling you to leave, but there's nowhere to go. I looked out again, searching the shadows for any sign of movement, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was out there. And that's when I saw it. Just at the edge of the flickering light, something shifted, a shape, barely visible, blending into the shadows. I couldn't make out details, but I could see enough. It was tall, human-like, yet somehow wrong. It moved, just slightly, leaning forward as if studying me in return. My heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat of panic. I wanted to step back, to press the button and close the doors, but I was frozen, trapped by whatever was staring back at me. And just as I was about to break free from my paralysis, the figure moved again, a sudden shift that felt deliberate, almost purposeful. It was stepping closer, inching toward me, closing the distance one slow, deliberate step at a time. The doors began to close, slowly shutting me off from that shadowy figure. But in those last few seconds, just as the gap narrowed, I saw it clearly, a pair of hollow, empty eyes, staring straight into mine, as if trying to tell me something, something I was desperate not to understand. And then, darkness. The doors shut, cutting me off, leaving me alone once more. But even as the elevator began to move, I knew that whatever I'd just seen, whatever had been watching me, it wasn't done with me yet. I wanted to believe it was all just my mind playing tricks on me. A power outage, an old, poorly maintained elevator. Maybe the figure in the shadows was just a trick of the flickering light. That's what I kept telling myself. But every time I tried to brush it off as a coincidence, something new, something even stranger, would happen, challenging whatever sense of calm I could muster. The elevator shuddered, jolting me out of my thoughts. I looked at the panel, noticing that, somehow, different floors had been lit up, floors I hadn't pressed. The buttons were glowing in a pattern, one after another, as if someone, something, was controlling it, mapping out a route that I hadn't chosen. Imagine standing there, feeling the hum of the elevator beneath your feet, yet realizing you have no say over where it takes you. You're completely helpless, moving deeper into a mystery that you can't understand, one that feels darker with every passing second. The lights dimmed again, and the elevator stopped between floors. Not quite level with any floor, just, paused, hanging there in the dark. A deep, unsettling quiet filled the air. And then, like before, it started again, a faint, rhythmic sound, almost like breathing. It was close this time. So close that I could almost feel it, warm and damp, brushing against my ear. I held my breath, hoping it would stop. But the sound only grew louder, filling the small space, echoing off the walls. And then, in a moment of pure, paralyzing fear, I realized, it was coming from above me. As I stood there, trapped between floors with nothing but the sound of my own heartbeat and that faint, chilling breathing above, I started thinking of all the stories I'd heard about haunted elevators. I knew I wasn't alone in this experience, and there were others who had felt this same fear. I could barely breathe. My hands were shaking, and my chest felt tight, as if the air was thickening around me, making it harder to take in even the smallest breath. Part of me wanted to escape, to find a way out, but the other part knew, there was nowhere else to go. The walls of the elevator felt closer, the air colder. Every inch of my body was screaming to leave, but I couldn't. I was trapped, stuck in a terrifying, suspended limbo. The lights flickered again, casting odd, distorted shadows along the walls. And then, I heard it, soft at first, almost like a faint whisper, then louder, like a rustle of fabric. I realized it was breathing. But this time, it wasn't coming from above. It was right there with me, filling the small, cramped space with a sound that was unnervingly close. My pulse raced, and I pressed myself against the corner, desperate to put any distance between me and whatever it was. Imagine it, standing there, trapped in a confined space, feeling the presence of something you can't see. The lights go dim, flickering just enough to let you catch brief glimpses of the walls around you, but not enough to reveal what lurks in the shadows. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. But when I opened them again, I wasn't alone. There, standing just a few feet away from me, was a figure. It was indistinct, more shadow than flesh, but it was there. I could see its outline, a human shape, but the face, there was something deeply, horribly wrong about it. Its eyes were empty, hollow, like looking into the bottom of a well. Its mouth was partially open, a faint breath escaping, but no words came out. It just stared at me, unblinking. Time seemed to slow down, and all I could hear was my heartbeat, pounding louder and louder. The figure's gaze bore into me, each second drawing it closer, as if the space between us was vanishing. I tried pressing every button on the panel, desperately hoping that one of them would work, that the doors would open and I could escape. But nothing happened. It was as if the entire building had gone silent, and I was the only one left. The lights flickered again, casting the figure's shadow onto the walls, and I could see its hand moving, reaching out, closer, inch by inch, bridging the small gap between us. I wanted to scream, but the sound was stuck in my throat, paralyzed by fear. And then, the lights went out completely, plunging me into total darkness. In that instant, I felt it, a cold, heavy hand resting on my shoulder. It was as if ice had seeped through my clothes, chilling me to the core. I could feel its grip tightening, holding me in place, unyielding, as if claiming me. I stood there, frozen, waiting for what would happen next, unable to see, unable to move. And just when I thought I couldn't bear it any longer. I don't know how much longer I stood there, frozen in that suffocating darkness, feeling that cold grip on my shoulder. My body was numb, unable to move, trapped in a nightmare that I couldn't escape. But then, just as suddenly as it had all started, the elevator doors, they opened. Slowly, with a screech that cut through the air, revealing the empty hallway outside. Without thinking, without a second of hesitation, I bolted. I didn't care where I was, or what was waiting for me out there, I just ran. My feet pounded against the cold, hard floor as I rushed out of that elevator, every instinct screaming to escape. When I looked back, the doors were closing, as if nothing had happened at all. The building was silent again, like nothing had ever occurred. But as I stumbled into the hallway, gasping for air, my heart still racing, I couldn't shake the feeling. That feeling that I was being watched, that something was still there, lurking in the dark. I tried to rationalize it, but the terror, it wouldn't leave. The building's management, when I asked, dismissed my experience without a second thought. They said the elevator was old, and the lights were prone to flickering, nothing more. But even as I left, a part of me couldn't shake the truth I'd seen. I wasn't the only one to experience something like this. Others had heard the same stories, others who'd seen figures in the corner of their eyes, or felt an unseen presence with them in the dark. But the hotel, it wouldn't acknowledge it. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, what if it wasn't just me? What if others had faced the same thing, and walked away, forever changed? So, let me ask you, what would you do if you were in my shoes? What if you stepped into that elevator and felt that cold hand on your shoulder? Would you run like I did? Or would you face the darkness, hoping to uncover the truth behind the building's haunted history? Will you be the next one to take the ride? If you've ever had an experience like this, or something that made you question what's real and what's not, don't keep it to yourself. Share your story with us below. We'd love to hear what happened, what you felt, and what you believe. And remember, next time you step into an elevator alone, think twice. You never know who, or what, might be riding with you. Like, comment, and subscribe for more true horror stories. Stay tuned for the next chilling tale.